Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day, and today we will be reviewing These Broken Stars trilogy. No, it's the Starbound trilogy, if I'm correct. So today we are reviewing the 3 books in this trilogy. So we have These Broken Stars, This Shattered World, and Their Fractured Light. This series was written by Amie Kaufman and Meagan Spooner, and I give this overall series a 4 out of 5 stars. All of these reviews will not be completely non-spoilery, but there will be a time exactly when I will be talking about spoilers, but you will be able to skip ahead if you want to know more about the second or the third book, and there will be a timestamp just down below in the comment section where you can jump ahead on which book you would like to know about. The reason why I'm doing all 3 books without mostly spoiling anything is basically because it is all in the same universe, but the 3 books have different main characters, so it's easy to talk about them and not spoil the book just before. So let's jump right ahead and talk about These Broken Stars. This world is in a very far ahead world where we have discovered speed light, where we're discovering new planets with new living beings, and mostly people will travel to another planet just for fun, sometimes for work. Like, it's a whole thing. It's like going to another country. It's just a normal thing that people do now. And we follow Lilac LaRue, who is the daughter of like the most powerful man in the entire universe, because he has a huge company which makes ships, airships, spaceships. And so they're really rich, very powerful. They don't need anything in life, basically, to the end of their days. And so we follow this girl who's basically untouchable because everybody's afraid of like just addressing her because her father will just destroy them entirely. And so we follow the main story on the Icarus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, but it's a spaceship. It's like a cruise ship, but in the space, if I'm making any sense. Because basically the way it's described in the book, it's so huge that it's basically like a cruise, but in space. It's like a spaceship version of the Titanic, like that big. And so at the beginning of the book, we follow Lilac and Tarver. Why did I say Thomas? Nobody in the series is called Thomas. We follow Tarver Meretsin. These 2 are the only survivors of the Icarus crash. So the very beginning of the book, there is a malfunction in the spaceship, and the Icarus falls down on a planet, an unknown planet, so they don't know anything about it, and Lilac and Tarver are the only survivors. Tarver is a very renowned military officer, so he's very known by everybody, and yeah. So that is basically the premise of the story. They escape in a pod, like a safety pod, where they landed very far away from where the actual crash happened. So they have to walk there to the crash site to find some communication because they don't have any in their pod, and so they have to find communication and call for help, obviously. So the main story is that Lilac and Tarver have to cross the new planet, unknown planet, so they don't know what's going to happen, if they're in danger, or they're hostile beings, animals, they don't even know. Lilac at the beginning of the book is a typical princess, so she was very unlikable at first, but you grow a lot to learn to love her, and she grows throughout the book, so it's a win-win situation. Tarver is hilarious. Like, he is a soldier, obviously, so he is a very, how do I say that? He doesn't go around in circles to do things, if that's even saying something, but like, he will do stuff and like not care if Lilac cannot follow. He will just do it. And so that's very like military mindset. It pains him in the beginning of the book that he cannot plan ahead everything because they don't know anything about the planet. So he cannot really plan, okay, we're going to do this and then we're going to do that, because they can encounter any kind of thing throughout their day, throughout their day. The writing style was lovely. I loved it. We have both Lilac and Tarver's point of views, and they are so different. It's really refreshing. I love point of views that are very, very distinct and that you don't mix them when they talk, because or else it's very confusing, and I hate when you have two point of views and you mix them and you don't even know who's talking anymore, and you have to go back at the beginning of the chapter to just know who's talking, and it's a whole thing. And so I really like the writing style, and I think that because there were two authors, they managed to do that, to separate both characters in the thinking and stuff. What? The pacing was really good. I really liked it. It wasn't too fast, it wasn't too slow. Even though they weren't doing much at a time, there would always something that would come up or something would happen. So it was always very well paced. The two characters were, first of all, hilarious. They were so funny, not necessarily in the way they talked, but more in the way that they thought. There were a lot of non-spoken jokes in the book, because since you're inside their head, they basically talk about whatever they think about. So sometimes they would have a reply to the other person, but without actually telling them. So they still write it, and that's really funny. Their chemistry is undeniable. They are so cute together, and at first they hate each other, which is really funny. They don't want to be around each other because Tarver doesn't really have a harsh reputation, but he's just like, he's a soldier and he can be cold and unemotional sometimes, and obviously everybody knows about Lilac, so they don't want to approach her, they don't want to be killed by her father. So yeah, the world building was so interesting. I loved it so much. It was in my head so bright, so many colors. The way it was described was really, really interesting, because you get both point of views of how the world is around them, and it's sometimes really different in the way that how they would focus on certain things, and that the other person would focus on something completely different in the world. And it was really interesting. There were a lot of info dumping, to be honest, because of course there's a lot of describing the planet, so it's a lot of info dumping, but the way it was done was perfect. I loved it so much. I don't know what was that, but it was perfect. I loved it. I didn't see it as info dumping while I was reading it, so that's the main goal. Between each chapter we have a page of something that we don't really know what it is, but it's basically Tarver being interrogated by somebody, and we don't know who, but we know that it's in the future after the events that happen in the book. So it's really nice to go back and forth between the two, because what Tarver tells the interrogator about what happens in on the planet is not the same as to what actually happens. So it's really interesting to see that he doesn't say anything and you don't really know why, so keeps you on edge. I give the first book 4 out of 5 stars. And if you have not been convinced yet by my review, well, I'm sorry, I don't have anything else to say really. But like, if you like new world buildings, if you like a bit of tech stuff, and if you like just great relationship growth, that is the main element I see in the series. Great character growth, great relationship growth. It's not pushed, it's not cliched. It's really, well, it's a bit cliched, but it's not pushed at a level where it's love at first sight. I hate those things, but in that book, that series, it's none of that, so that was amazing. Now I'm going to go into the spoilery part. I don't have a lot to say, so I will be brief, but there will be something on the screen to tell you that I'm spoilering the first book, and if you want to go right ahead to the second book, you can go in the timestamps where I will be talking about the second book. So you have been warned. First of all, I want to talk about Lilac's death and rebirth. That was some crazy things that was happening there. It was, at first I actually didn't get it because I just thought that Tarver was just hallucinating her, but then he touched her and she was not a ghost, and I was like, what's going on? This is tripping. I don't like that. I don't know if she's good, maybe she's evil, we don't even know, so I don't know. It was weird. I was very confused at first about the whispers or the things that we don't really know what they are. The fact that they only got inside Lilac's head and not inside Tarver's, so we don't really know. Maybe Lilac's imagining things, but then she died and she not died. I don't know how to explain that. She Jesused it out and she came back to life. So yeah, we don't know yet if their true nature is good or evil, which is interesting because they could be the main, well, not the main villain, because that's a bit, I don't like to say the main villain, but they could be a very interesting antagonist for the rest of the series. Of course, Lilac and Tarver get together. That's not a surprise for anyone, I think. When I first started reading the book, I knew that they were going to smush at some time, so I think it's not a surprise to anyone. I still don't want to talk about it in the non-spoilery review because some people are more clueless than others, I guess, but I felt like it was inevitable in that case because it's a YA novel. I don't know how to express that in any other way. I'm sorry. As I say that it was inevitable, I also loved the way it was done because it was not pushed, it was not rushed, it was very well paced. They help each other even though they didn't like each other, so that was the first signs of maybe I like him, maybe I like her, but like I don't want to be with her, but she's still important because I don't want her to die or I don't want him to die. So it was really backwards love. Is that a thing? I don't think that it's a thing. Let me rephrase that. It's kind of a backward falling in love story because they don't want to, but they start to care for each other, and then because they start to care for each other, they start to love each other. And I love those stories because they're not looking for it, but they find it anyways, and it's the most beautiful thing. I wrote something about the next book before I had started reading the second book, and I wrote that Tarver and Lilac are not the main characters in that story, and I was like, what's going on? How is it not? You know? But it still looked really interesting, so of course I was excited to read it, but I was really wondering if there would ever be a connection between the characters, because if there are none, I don't think it would be called a trilogy. Who knows? Maybe it could have been. Alright, we are moving on to their no, this is not the right book. Alright, so we're moving on to this Shattered World. This is the second book. And in this world, we are on a planet called Avon. Avon? I don't know if it's Avon or Avon. I will say Avon, okay? Just bear with me. We follow the two main characters, Jubilee, Chase, and Flynn Cormac. Yes. Jubilee also has a nickname Lee, and also Captain Chase. Well, that's not a nickname, but that's her formal officer name. So I would call her Captain Chase because that's mainly how people call her, like, throughout the whole book. So we are here on planet Avon, where everything is dying, and the reason why it is because the government decided to place themselves on this planet to run some experiments, well, secret experiments. And so most of they were doing kind of destroyed the planet and everything that was great about it kind of just died. So the water, the food, agriculture, farming, the sky, everything disappeared. On that planet, people don't see the sky. That's how crazy it is, because there are always clouds surrounding the planet because of how polluted it is. So that's a great fun. And so on that planet, obviously, we have pockets of resistance. Flynn Cormack is one of the resistance members. His sister was she was not the leader, but she became a voice for the resistance at some point. She was killed for it, and Flynn is having some difficulties to believe that war is the only answer to their problems, and so he always tries to go with the peaceful way of approaching their problems with the government. Captain Lee is obviously a captain, and she works obviously for the government. I keep saying government, but they're called corporations, but it's a government basically. And so her job when she goes to Avon is to kill those pockets of resistance. And so they actually just imprison them, but if they fight, they will shoot on sight. So yeah. The book starts where Flynn Cormack decides to kidnap, I will say it, kidnap Captain Chase. I would say not the most peaceful move in the history of peaceful moves, but who am I to judge, right? So he decides to kidnap her for knowledge, actually. So he wants to give her back if the government leaves, basically, or helps them to grow things out of the ground. They can't grow anything from the ground because everything is like dead, and so they are completely dependent on the government's food, the government's water, everything. They are very, very dependent on them, and so Flynn wants information on how to be independent and grow stuff and have clean water and etc, etc. Unfortunately, they don't negotiate with terrorists, as they say. And so Flynn's plan falls pretty quickly in the toilet. So he decides to let her go. But they will stay in contact because they do want to end this war, even though they're not on the same side. That is basically the premise of the story. I thought it was really, really good. I liked it a little bit better than the first one. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. Oh, and I just have to say, the book takes place months after the events of the first book. So the crash, they talk about it like merely in the beginning of the book, but it's been like 9 months since the crash of the Icarus. Captain Chase was a very interesting character because at the beginning, she was like Tara. She was very one-dimensional. She did not care for anything else than her job, and that was basically it. She's followed rules for her entire life, so she doesn't really know how to not do that and how to live a different way, so she just keeps doing that. Throughout the book, she grows a lot, but we also get to see her talk about her being a child. We also get it because in the beginning of every chapter, like the first book, there is like a little snippet of a story. We don't know what it is, we don't understand it, but we do understand that sometimes they talk about Captain Chase. And so we get to see a glimpse of her past life when she was a child. And so at that time we understand a little bit more about her, and we get to know her more as a three-dimensional character. Flynn was very funny. I don't know if it's a running gag, pun intended, to this series, but most of the characters are just really, really funny. The guys especially, they're like just make jokes all around just for fun. They don't really care about it. They don't care about what they say, so they make jokes like a lot. But it's fun, so I don't care. Even though he's very comedic about everything, he is very also sensitive about his issues with his people and the government, because He, as I said in the beginning of the description of the second book, he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to go to war. He wants to end this thing peacefully because he doesn't want anybody else to die. And especially since his sister, well, died because of that war. So he doesn't want anything of that sort happening again, but he cannot be sure that it won't happen again. So he's very conflicted because there are a lot of people in his village. Is it a village? I don't know. His pocket of resistance that want to fight, that want to go to war because they are very tired and sick of the government being there and crushing their planet. But Flynn knows that if they go there, well, not unarmed, but outnumbered, they will all be killed, and that he doesn't want that, obviously. Captain Chase and Flynn's relationship was really interesting at the beginning since, well, he, as I said before, kidnaps her, so not off to a great start, I would say. But they still keep contact with each other even though they're not together because they do want to solve this problem peacefully. They don't want to go to war and kill a bunch of people, innocent people, just because they, well, not that they have to, but just to end the war, basically. They know that they can't be together because, well, they're not on the same side. So it's not a great start to a loving relationship where both people agree on the same stuff, first of all. But also just because they know that if they get caught, they will be most likely killed because both people on each side won't be they won't be really agreeing to whatever they have as a relationship. So yeah, the way that their relationship grew was very interesting. It was not the same at all as Lilac and Tarver, because in this book they're not together most of the time, and so they end up doing choices that really shatter their values and what they believe in, especially Captain Chase. And at first she doesn't really she understands, but she doesn't really know why she's doing those things because she thinks that well, they're bad things, but she still does them. And at some point she realizes that it's because she does them for him, and that because she might love him or might like him, whatever. I loved the writing style. Well, obviously, because I loved it in the first book, it's not really going to change that much. The pace was really good also. We almost always kept something on edge at the end of every chapter, which was really, really good because even though you change characters, when you go back to the other character, you like remember that something was happening and you're just really happy to read about that character, even though we're leaving the other character on edge. The only thing that bothered me was the world building because they were close to none. We are on a new planet, but the way that it is described, it is not a lot described, and when it is described, it's mostly swamps, which is not the best description in the entire world, I would say. Like, you have the ground where people live, and you have the swamps. And that's basically the world description of this planet, and I understand that that's how they feel because everything is destroyed, but like, it's not interesting. The world building was just not as interesting as the first book because in the first book I felt like it was more colorful, there were more description of what was happening. In this book I know that the main reason was because they were not happy, so the description of course wasn't like, it's so beautiful, there are trees everywhere. Like, of course there are none actually, but like it could have used a little more description overall. So that was it for my non-spoilery review of the second book. If you want to know more about the third book, just follow the timestamps below and I will be talking more in depth about the spoilery part of this book, so you have been warned. First of all, the link with the first book, I did not see it coming and it was amazing. I loved it so much. The fact that Tarver was Jubilee's officer, he was her officer or something like that, and just the fact that they had a relationship link together, it was just so cool because I was afraid that they were just going to be thrown together and not really have any connection, but there was, and that was really cool. And when he came on the planet, I was so excited because it feels like when two characters from your favorite TV shows collide in one episode, and it's euphoria. I don't know how to pronounce that word.
You're Hannah Montana! And you're wearing cake. Vanilla, my favorite. She has the name. This is New Jersey, Nebraska, Arizona.
The link with the Whispers also was really interesting because at first you don't really know why there's a secret facility, but then you know that it was for the Whispers, and it's so cool because it ties a lot of unknown things together. Of course, Flynn and Captain Chase were... I loved it. It was really cute. Flynn was rushing a little bit in the beginning, but Captain Chase kept him on edge. Well, not on edge, but like she pushed him away basically. And I really loved it because she took her time to develop her feelings and to understand them, and that was awesome. I'm really excited for the third book because I wrote something about reading the next book before I had read it. It says that all the characters are coming together, and I'm so up for it. I'm so excited about it because it was two characters that we already knew. So the two characters are the Knave of Hearts and Sophia, so from this book, from the second book. And so it's really interesting that we don't get like new characters that come from nowhere. Like, we already know them and we know why they're the main characters because they have so much link with the other main characters. Alright, we are up to finally the third book in this trilogy, Their Fractured Light. So this book takes place on a new planet called Corinth. This planet is the most interesting in the three planets that we've had because it's a more city-like planet. You have the upper ground, well, the normal ground actually, where everything is like super rich, super fancy, super expensive, and you have the underground where it's the lower class, where people don't have enough money to live on the ground, so they live underground. And it feels like a little bit like, if you have to picture it, picture Alita's movie. A little bit like that. That's how I imagine the undergrounds. And when I imagine the upper ground where everything's super expensive, I just feel like any city that's super rich, like New York, Bali, Shanghai, Singapore, like those types of cities where it's super expensive. Everything is like glass for some reason. I don't know why. I feel like if you're super rich, you will have glass everywhere. I don't know why. So in this book, we follow Sophia and Gideon, for God. I forgot his name because I was just remembering the Knave of Hearts, but that's his pseudonym as the like most famous hacker in the universe. Sophia is the girl who helped Flynn in the second book to hide while he was injured. As to like say thank you, he helps Sophia to escape from Avon. So she ends up on Corinth, and she is a very good hacker herself, so she changes her identity and she tries to take down LaRue Industries because they are the reason why her father died, and because of the experiments on Avon, her father was killed. So her main goal is to track down LaRue, and she has a lot of contacts to try to get close to him as fast as possible to, well, kill him. She doesn't have really any other plan. She just wants to kill him. Yeah. On the other hand, we have Gideon, who is a professional hacker. He's better than Sophia at some point. His main goal is also to take down LaRue Industries, but he wants to do it cleanly, if I would say like that. But he wants to take him down and show to everyone what he's been doing to a lot of people, actually. And so he wants to broadcast everything that he's done to the entire world, entire universe. Sophia is really, really smart, but she's also really broken. And so at some point, she doesn't think in the best way. Mainly the fact that she wants to kill LaRue without actually thinking about the consequences of that action. But anyways, she is very overprotective of herself. And so when she meets Gideon, she doesn't want to tell him her real name. She doesn't want to tell him anything about herself because she's afraid that he will be able to take it against her, I guess. She has a very weird but very cool capacity to read people's body language. So if they're stressed, if they're angry, if they're sad, if they're anything, basically, she just knows instinctively what they're up to, what they're feeling. And so it saves her many times in the book because she has the capacity to tell if someone is lying to her. Gideon is the most of all the three guys in this trilogy. And when I say the most, I just mean like the most extra person in this trilogy. Between all the boys, he's super funny. He's not narcissistic, but he flatters himself a lot, and he knows he's good looking, and he knows that he can take advantage of it, and it's really fun to read about him. One thing I found really interesting is that he is a genius at hacking, in that he always says that he has comfort with his computers because it's something that he knows by heart so much. But when you read about him, you realize that he still wants human connection, that he doesn't want to be all alone in his room hacking all day. He still wants to connect with other people. Their relationship was realistic to an extent that I was really, really impressed with, because they're both hackers. So like in real life, I cannot say so myself, but I would expect that you don't trust anyone. And so they end up having to become partners, and so they have to stay together to reach their own goal. And they don't trust each other at all. And I think that it's the funniest thing to read, because both of them, when you read both their point of views, you just know that they want to trust the other person, but they just don't. And that it's funny, I don't know why. And it's really cool because their relationship really grows and they start to like each other, they start to really care for each other, but they both are still not sure if they can trust the other person, which is so weird because you care for that person, you like them, but you still don't know if you can trust that person, if that person isn't just going to run away at any time. So it was really interesting to read about that. The writing style, I loved it. The beginning of the chapter, we still get a little glimpse of something, and in that case you understand that it's the Whisper who are talking, which is so interesting because you get to have their point of view, because for the most part, you believe that they're the main antagonist, I would say. And so it's really interesting to have their point of view on things and to know how they feel about humans and how we interact with other people, and etc, etc. As I said, the world building is cray cray. I loved it so much. And I don't know why, but I could visually imagine it so vividly in my head. And maybe that's why I loved it so much, because it wasn't like 2 pages of description. Like, it was fine. It was not too much described, but it was well enough described that you could imagine how everything looked, and that was gold. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars, and the only reason I did not give it a full 5 stars was because of the ending part. It was like the last 50 pages of the book. I will not say why in specific details, but I just thought that it was anticlimactic and I was expecting a little bit more action that what was happening actually in the book, and so it didn't keep me on edge as I was throughout the whole book actually. So it was the only thing that like I was a little bit disappointed with, I would say. And yeah, I will be going into the small spoilery parts of this book, but I really hope that you enjoy this. And if you haven't started this series, well, I hope that you will, and you will tell me down below once you will have read it what you thought about it, because I really like this series and I think that more people should read it, especially because of the relationships in this book. They are amazing. Alright, so I just want to talk about when they all get together, and it's too exciting for me to talk about, but it was like in half of the story, and I thought it would be like towards the end where they would just like come up, but like the half of the book is with all of the characters, and it's so cool. I loved it so much. I was so excited, and yeah, like seeing them all together and act and just behave with each other, it was I loved it so much. It was so much fun. LaRue's final fate at the end of the book was sad. I don't care much for that man, but that fate was worse than death, I would say. It was much worse, and I would have rather him be killed by the whispers than have him tortured and pretend that everything's fine, and that it was really heartbreaking, and Lilac could see that he was never going to recover from this, and it was sad. The whispers were surprising. I didn't know that they were separated, so obviously it was special to read about it, to see both point of view so different from about humans actually, and it was really interesting to have the nice whispers talk about their brother, I would say, in a way that they understood him. They wanted him to come home and to stop worrying so much about the past and how hurt he was, and it was interesting to see that they would just take him back even though he's done some horrible things, and that they understood why he did what he did, how far he was pushed by LaRue to just do unspeakable things. And so I don't know, it was an interesting conversation. The epilogue was perfect. I loved it. It was so cute. It was fan service, honestly, but I will never be disappointed by those things, okay? We are still from Sophia's and Gideon's point of views, and it's like a year after all of the events, and they're just all so happy together, and I love it, and it's satisfying to have that epilogue. And sometimes there are books where, especially series, where you have the end happen and nothing else happens after that, and I'm like, I know that you want to end this because it's a long book, but like, it's not the end of their story, and I wish I would have just one more chapter to see what they're up to now, and that epilogue was that, and I loved it for that. And yeah. That was it for this video, guys. I'm sorry that it was so long, but I think that we can expect that from a whole series review. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next week with a new video. Bye!